Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming on this grisly November day. I'm Christine Sipnowicz. I'm the chair of the Coalition of Kingston Communities, and welcome to our 10th anniversary celebration with special guest Charlie Angus. Let me just explain how the afternoon will go. We'll have a few introductory remarks from me, then Charlie Angus will speak for half an hour, then Q&A for half an hour, and then just some mingling and conversation, and you're all very much encouraged to stick around for that, get a drink, relax, and get to know each other. Well, 10 years ago this very month, when the city of Kingston was updating its official plan, yes, it was doing it back then as well, a group of concerned Kingstonians representing diverse communities from across the city kept running into each other at City Hall. They had different concerns: cultural heritage, green space, unsympathetic development in their neighborhoods. But what united them all was a frustration with the lack of transparency, accountability, and proper process at City Hall. The Coalition of Kingston Communities was born. The coalition now has 20 participating groups, with new groups joining this year. Many of you are here today, and it's wonderful to see familiar and new faces. We issue annual report cards, make delegations to council, publish op-eds, and participate in city committees. We organize all candidates' meetings when there's a municipal election to ensure voters in each district can learn about their candidates' views. Our board is made up of people with experience and expertise in law, city council membership, urban planning, social activism, and academia. Transparency at City Hall is a never-ending struggle, but we're proud of the work we've done keeping council and staff on their toes. Long may the Coalition of Kingston Communities continue to do so. Well, speaking of keeping people in power on their toes, Charlie Angus is a hero for anyone who cares about social justice, democracy, and of course, since the election of Donald Trump south of the border, standing up for Canadian sovereignty. Charlie was a federal MP for the riding of Timmins James Bay from 2004 to 2024, I think it was. A journalist, broadcaster, musician, and politician. Less than a year ago, Charlie spearheaded the social movement, The Resistance, giving talks across the country, usually with standing room only, connecting on social media and in the press. For aficionados of the 1980s punk rock scene in Toronto, back in the day, Charlie was also the bass player in the band L'Étranger. You might remember their hit, One People All in South Africa, One People All in Toronto. I certainly remember it, very endearing. He was kicking ass then, and he's kicking ass now. Thank you very much for joining us, Charlie. We are honored indeed and very pleased to have you talk to us here in Kingston. Thank you.
I normally say that one of the fundamentals for social change in this era is to kill Zoom, but I couldn't drive down, so I'm going to make that exception today, and I won't mention about the Zoom thing. But I do think maybe the most important thing you're going to do today will be the chats afterwards. And I'm going to talk about why that matters. It's really knitting and rebuilding community is going to be the fundamental that we have to look at in terms of holding the line in this age of the gangster fascism that we're seeing, but also in the increasing threat that we're facing, which is, I'm going to go through some of those threats and issues today before we open it up to questions. One is the global-ish frame. I think we have to be talking about where Canada is in a global world that is disintegrating around us. I'll talk a bit about the national reality in terms of where we're at as a country, and there are some really hopeful signs and some very worrying signs. One of the things I do want to talk about is the existential threat, because I think in our hearts that's what keeps us up at night, and that's what makes us afraid. And we have to be able to talk about the existential threats as a way of building a willingness to confront it, to challenge it, and to change the course of history. Because as Joe Strummer said, the future is unwritten, and it's going to be up to us to rewrite the future. which will then bring me down to where we're at. And what you guys are doing is the local and the importance of building a sense of community from the ground up, because nobody is coming to save us. We're either going to do this ourselves, or we're going to be put into a very, very dark future. You know, I used the term future. I waited my whole life for the future, and now it's here. I just thought there would be more time. And I think that's how we're all feeling. So to uh, put this in kind of a frame that I think we need to think of is that we kept looking for when we would get back to normal. Was normal 2 weeks before COVID hit in March 2020? Was it October 6th before the attacks in Gaza? Was it 3 days before the Trump election? We keep thinking that there's going to be some way to get back to a world that we felt we knew, but that world is gone. And that's, I think, really important to consider, that we're in a new era. We're in a new, John Valiant in his book, Fire Weather, says we've actually tipped into a new geologic era. We used to talk about geologic eras in terms of millions of years. John Valiant said that anyone born after 1990 is learning to navigate in a world that is fundamentally different from the world before 1990 as any other geological era. He calls it the Petrocene. And the threats that are posed in this new geological era is something we are going to talk about. But I've been trying to figure a way to make sense of what's happened watching the disintegration of the rule of law in the United States, the tawdriness of what we're seeing. You know, at first people were unwilling to use the word fascism, I think, because it seems so loaded. I used the word fascism from the get-go because I'd been doing a lot of reading about the 1930s, and the Nazis were basically a criminal organization, and Donald Trump is king criminal in the United States. And the Nazis were grifters. They're just different than, and it's not the same kind of fascism, but where it goes, it's a playbook. And so identifying that threat is really, really, really important. A friend of mine said to me one time, and it's stuck with me ever since, did you ever wonder why Canada was allowed to get by for so long without someone noticing us? You know, that we could be a country of 37 to 40 million people with so much natural wealth, peace, you know, good order in government, when the rest of the world was in chaos. They don't, after a certain point, some power would notice, and they have noticed us. And I think that this is part of the global threat that we're seeing. The rise right now is a new political era. Just like we're in a new geological era, we're in a new political era, and there's no going back to what was before. We are in an era as different from the 2010s as, you know, the Victorian era was from the Roaring '20s. These are cultural, economic, political breaches that have occurred, and we have to frame ourselves within the world that we're in. Otherwise, we're going to be continually disoriented. I've been calling this new era the Age of Monsters. It's from Antonio Gramsci's Prison Diaries, where he said there's an old world that's dying and a new world struggling to be born. But right now we are in the time of the monsters, because we do not have a sense of what this new world will be yet. And so there is a grappling and a fighting for space, and a fighting for what this world will be. And right now, on the ascendant is the chaos machine and the mega machine and the monsters. And so when we frame the global threat in recognition that the things that we were counting on to help us are not going to be there to help us. So what do I mean by that? Well, you know, we grew up in a world where there was a sense of the Western order. You know, it might not have been fair for anyone else in the global South, but it worked pretty well for us. The notion of international law, the notion of trade deals, which of course many of us knew there were severe problems with the trade deals, but we were sold this idea that there'd be some kind of, you know, global consensus Well, that global consensus has been blown out of the water. It was certainly blown out of the water for us when Donald Trump began to threaten us. At first, we were shocked, then we were upset, and then we were like, well, it can't be true. But if you look at Donald Trump, he's a gangster oligarch. He sees the world like Vladimir Putin, which is about those who have the dollars, those who have the guns, make the decisions. So the things that we would have counted on, treaties, negotiations, respect, that's all blown out of the water. And this is where Canada is having to find itself. Where are we going to be in this world? This is a world where we see from what's happened in Ukraine and a war that is becoming increasingly driven by AI and drones, a frightening global conflict potential. There are a lot of writers who are saying we are already in the third global war. And it's going to be a very dirty and ugly war. Certainly what we've seen in Gaza when, you could sit and watch an entire people be starved to death on television, and all the people that we thought that would step up, the UN, the Western leaders, the calls for intervention, the calls for negotiated settlements, it all got blown out of the water. So if it becomes possible there, it becomes possible anywhere. So I frame all those things sort of as the chaos and fears that we're seeing in a world that we suddenly don't know what touching ground means anymore. That's, I think, part of the issues that I want to talk about in terms of the larger existential fear and what it does to us personally, because we're looking at a world we don't understand and a world that is rightfully frightening. So where does Canada stand in this? I think the national picture has been very surprising and, in a way, hopeful. I think it would be fair to say that all of us were expecting that Canada would we stand up when we were first threatened? How many of us actually thought that would happen? Leading up to January of 2025, Canadians were cranky. We were not wanting to engage. We hadn't come out of COVID very well. We weren't meeting each other. We were isolated. We were alone. We were very susceptible to the rage algorithms that fed on us and certainly created all manner of problems, whether it was in our homes or relatives, people that we knew who'd gone down the dark rabbit holes. And again, what was reality in this world? So when Donald Trump came, we were, I think, on the verge of sleepwalking towards a MAGA-style disaster. We saw that with the Conservatives driving this agenda of rage. And then suddenly he threatened us and Canadians stood up. I think we can't underplay how incredible the response of Canadians has been. I want to stress that. I stress that everywhere I go. It's the reason that I do the work that I do, is that ordinary people understood that what we were being threatened with and this kind of gangster threat ideology was just fundamentally wrong, and it offended us. The issue of the boycott, it's still not really framed very well, I think, in Canadian media, but it has been an extraordinary act of civil resistance. Probably one of the most unique acts of civil resistance in memory, because boycotts have always been the tool that the powerless use against the powerful. But in this case, nobody organized this. People just did it because they were, again, offended by the threat, offended by the attitude that Donald Trump treated us like that. So we're seeing now the latest news, $5.7 billion lost to the American economy from tourism. There's a huge fear right now in the United States. The snowbirds are not coming back. The snowbirds bring $20.5 billion into the American economy. Many of the snowbirds are saying they will go elsewhere, but they will not spend that money in the United States. That has a huge economic pressure on MAGA and their ability to continue to buffalo the American people. The boycott has caused massive devastation to the American wine industry, 97% drop in sales. I mean, that's a market obliterated. And that's from ordinary people speaking up and standing up. It's really, I want to talk about that in terms of solutions, because if we have the power to pull money out at such an organic level of just people making decisions of what they're going to buy and what they're not going to buy. We also then have to start thinking, well, what can we do in terms of a positive vision? So I'm going to speak about that in a minute. What I want to also say about Canada that's really important, and we have to we have to look to our victories in these times. We can't just keep seeing things are wrong, they're bad. Oh my God, what are they going to do next? They're going to do what they're going to do. We have to do what we are going to do. And the world is watching Canada right now. I get messages from my work with Midas Canada every single day from people all over the world who see Canada right now as a symbol. They see us as standing up. We may not feel like we are, but people are seeing that. That's really an important thing. I say to everyone, we're holding the line right now. It's a fragile line, but we're holding it. And that line could break if we start to fight amongst ourselves, if we start to lose hope, if we stop seeing the big picture. But there is a potential in this country to make decisions about where we're going. You know, I was just on Midas Touch, and they were talking about the fact that Canada set up a consulate in Greenland. I mean, this is a total FU to Donald, but it's showing that we're really rethinking our trade relations. We're rethinking our strategic alliances. Like we're meeting with Finland, Sweden. Now we're talking with the Danes in Greenland. We're looking at circumpolar issues in a way that we are not going to be dependent on the United States. That's extraordinary. The outreach that the Prime Minister is doing in Europe is really important because everything shifted globally, and Canada either is going to step up and find our place, or we're going to come under the so-called protection of a vassal state. So the national direction that we take is super important, but it's going to be really dependent that we hold our provincial governments also and our federal governments to account. I think it's not helpful to just say we all got to be on the same team and we're all going to get there, because where are we going? We have to talk about where we're going. Democracy is fundamentally about choices. So it's really important that we are engaged at the national level and at the provincial level, because, you know, good old Doug Ford, Captain Canada one day, Captain Grifter the next day. We have to make sure that our leaders put our national and global interests front and center and hold to it. So it means that we have to show up and step up. In terms of the existential threat, this is, I think, is the fundamental crisis of our time. There are three real serious threats that we need to start getting our heads around. One is climate. I've talked about John Valiant's, that we're in the Petrocene now. We are on track to burn through the 2.6 degree rise, which would be catastrophic for life on planet Earth. That's the direction we're on, and we've always been on that track. We just kept telling ourselves that, oh well, don't worry, we'll still be able to. Stephen Guilbeault said to me that if we build TMX pipeline, we'll reinvest that money in green solutions. It's like drinking your way to sobriety. Canada is a petro state. We have driven the advance of the oil agenda, with a mercenary zeal. The last 10 years, Canada led the world in increased oil production, and the planet's on fire. And we have to deal with that. We have to start talking about the existential threat to our children, because I think it plays on all of us. It plays on young people. I talk to many young people who don't believe that they're going to have children because they don't believe there's a future. That's something that we need to talk about and we need to address, because if you're of my age, you remember what it was like when we felt we had no future from the nuclear threat. And yet we marched in the streets. We brought down the Berlin Wall. We brought down the apartheid regime. We showed what people coming together could do. And that the existential threat of climate is something we can't say, well, we'll deal with that after, because right now we have to be elbows up. It is one of the major pressures on us. Another major pressure, and we don't have to get into it today, but it's keeping me up at night, is AI. The militarization of AI, the massive impact that AI is going to have on our economy, especially now in a time when the oligarchs are rising and everybody else is just getting by. AI does present some fundamentally existential threats. If you want to know why I stay up late at night, I got this one book. It's called, I'm just reading it now. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. Why superhuman AI would kill us all. Nice reading. Uh, but it's written by two AI experts. So there is a discussion about AI. I'm not going to deal with that today, but it's something I'm thinking about a lot. But the other existential threat is the threat about our notions of reality itself. I think what's made it really hard for us is that we look on a world that seems so crazy. One of the things about the extremist playbook, Steve Bannon called it flooding the zone with shit, of just keeping people off their feet or on their back feet because of this constant craze, rage, poking, memes. You don't even know if the people fighting with you on Facebook are real. It makes you feel isolated and alone. And that is the biggest threat of all the threats, is our sense of isolation from each other. Our fear of not trusting what we see and what we read. To me, these are the biggest threats. All the other stuff, the trade wars, what's happening globally between Putin and Netanyahu and Trump and their wars. If we don't feel confident in our communities and what we're seeing and talking to each other and building, that sense of that war on reality, to me, is the biggest threat of this era. And this is what we have to deal with. That brings me to the local and what you guys are doing. We really need to just start rewiring our brains and our communities. There was a time when we all went out to gatherings, we all went out to meetings, we all went and participated in events, and then we sort of stopped. And maybe we stopped politically because the whole myth of globalization and digital economy, and we were going to live in this world that we could just text each other by phone on our phones. But I think we've seen how much that has failed us. We have to get out and meet one another. So what I would say to you in your organization is what Gil Scott-Heron's line was: each one reach one, each one teach one. For every meeting you have, bring someone who hasn't been there before. If you see someone that you think has got a spark, encourage it. I know that might sound like I'm just, trying to placate you and tell you that life will be better. No, this is how we rebuild. This is how we rebuild democracy. We've got to bring people into the fold. We've got to move beyond where we're comfortable and start building and building, because there's more of us than of the haters. I think what worked for the conspiracy haters is that they reached out to each other. They brought people in. They radicalized people. We have to on-radicalize people. We have to make people feel that they're part of something. That is the work that I've done my whole life in terms of many of the grassroots fights I've led and been involved in. It was bringing in people who had not been politically active before, encouraging them, making them feel like they're part of something. That is going to be essential in rewiring how we think, but rewiring and rebuilding from the grassroots up. Because I believe at the end of the day that the only future we're going to have is going to come from us restoring a sense of community, of rebuilding our neighborhoods, of building a sense of trust with each other in our communities, and then knowing that we're part of a larger community, of not fearing the other. So what I try to do with my Midas network is that we're talking to people from all over the world and saying, we all share these values. The other side work across international borders. The far right playbook is used in Germany, it's used in France, it's used in Asia, it's used in the United States, it's used in South America. Of course, it's going to be used in Canada. So what do? Well, we have to take the strengths that we have as Canadians, the sense of solidarity, the sense of goodness that we have with each other, and start to offer ways of building from the local to the regional, to the provincial, to the national, and reaching out to build this network globally to say we've got to take back our democracy. So it comes down to each of us. This is the message I try and bring in community after community. And I want to assure you, everywhere I've gone in Canada, I've met people who are so determined to take their democracy back. This may be a frightening time, but it's actually a very invigorating time. It's an exciting time. People feel that things matter. Books matter now. Ideas matter now. Discussions matter. Whereas before, maybe we thought it didn't matter at all. We just let, the talking heads and the political pundits do the talking for us. Well, you're listening to them and you realize they don't get it. So your talk matters, your engagement matters, and reaching out and bringing people in and building community from your level to the national, to the international is how we're going to take on the gangsters. I think if we do that, we will be able to get through this. And this is where I'll end it, is that, as I said about the boycott, if we can pull billions of dollars out of an economy, we can choose where those billions go. And I think we need to start thinking in terms of the sustainability of our nation, what kind of nation we're going to be. Are we just trying to survive a tariff war, or are we deciding, are we going to be the light on the hill, a democratic nation, a just nation, a fair nation, a nation where people aren't sleeping on the streets at night, a nation where people aren't left behind? If we can stand up to MAGA, and if we can stand up to the threats that they're throwing at us, let's not go back and be mediocre. Let's build the nation that we believe we are and make that nation a reality. And to do that means bringing a lot more people to the table and encouraging them and letting them think and understand that it is possible to make these changes. So with that, I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think. But those are my thoughts for a snowy Sunday afternoon here in Northern Ontario.
Thanks. We have Q&A now, but I do want to make a little pitch. We have the Coalition of Kingston Communities has no budget, no finances, except people digging into their pockets and contributing. So if you feel motivated, please to donate to help us defray the costs of getting Charlie to talk to us. That would be much appreciated. So there's a donation box at the back there. If you could pass that around, please. If you haven't donated already, that would be really, really wonderful. Thank you. Anyway, enough of the dirty lucre. Let's get talking about grassroots democracy. We have a very fancy gizmo called the Owl that picks up the microphone basically picks up the voice, and the camera picks up the face of whoever is talking. So if you just raise your hand, Charlie will be able to hear and see you. So the floor is open. Yeah, right there, yes.
I guess I have, maybe I don't have to yell, I don't know. I have two kind of interrelated questions, I guess. One is, my underlying assumption is that we need to organize, but by organizing, we should be organizing around action, because action tends to empower people and it tends to beget more action. I also think that we need to be having proportionally fewer people who have the same hair color as I do, and more of the folks who are younger. And I'm kind of wondering, on the assumption that those two are reasonable assumptions, I'm sort of wondering, do you know of other groups, organizations, folks who are organizing successfully proximate to Kingston? Because I agree, not only do we have to organize within Kingston, but we need to be building those connections geographically proximate, so that regardless of supply chains or anything else, we're actually being stronger and building larger.
That's a great question. I totally agree. Action is everything. People who go to meetings and just talk and then go home actually end up feeling more defeated. I think at the end of the day, it wears you down. It might feel good for a while, but you need to see that you're making ground. So I can't tell you what that action is, because it will differ from community to community. It's one of the messages I've been giving with the resistance tours. Like, wherever we go, if we can get a local group set up, if you can start thinking, framing what's local, but how do you bring people in? How do you make more people feel part of it? Is there a group near Kingston? I'm not sure. We're trying now to, and we're such a small team. It's just me, my photographer, Raul, or videographer, and Jan, who's our air traffic controller who coordinates us. We're trying to figure out how we start to make connections between the various groups. There's an amazing group that just started out on the West Coast, and we're checking in with them to see what their models are, because I think those models could help other groups. In terms of young people, this is the question I get asked all the time. So I have two responses. One is, I believe that the crisis that young people are facing, they are facing the ultimate existential threat. And they have incredible job insecurity, incredible pressures on all levels. So are they coming out to our meetings with people with gray hair? No. But we need to lift that pressure off them. They shouldn't have to be defending and fighting to save the planet. They should be able to work and get lives. I think it is a responsibility of our generation to lift some of that weight off them. But the other question is people say, well, where are the young people? Meaning they should be at our events, as opposed to where are the young people so we can go to their events? Because young people have been involved in a lot of amazing things recently, and I didn't think got very much support. The university students who spoke up on Gaza were vilified in the media. They should never have been vilified, because what was being accused was simply false in terms of young people speaking up against genocide. Another example was school students from Ontario went down to Queen's Park to show solidarity for Grassy Narrows. I was in grade 5 when I learned about the mercury poisoning in Grassy Narrows. It's still going on. That's been my whole life. I just visited Grassy Narrows a few years ago, and I saw in the schools young children, and I could see the visible effects of mercury poisoning, because it's a really specific thing to see that tremor in children's hands, and it freaked me out. So these young people went down to show solidarity. This is what our schools did. When I was in the 80s, our schools were, power plants of social activism. But Doug Ford announced that they weren't going to let our young people be politicized and wasn't going to allow this to happen. And it's like, that's bullshit. So again, parents need to speak up at our schools and say, we want our kids active. We want to have their backs if they speak up and not be shut down and infantilized. Because I think the message Doug Ford sent to young people was really clear. They know what's happening in Grassy Narrows and what they're not allowed to come out. So I think it's up to us to be a voice supporting young people in what they're doing. And then maybe we can start to learn from them, because I think they know what's going on in the world in many, many ways. So this is an ongoing thing, and a thing we need to do better at. And it's something I really want to personally work more on. But I encourage everyone to pay attention. Are there youth events? Are there youth gatherings? If you hear about it, how can you help?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk. One of my big concerns, I'm 80 years old, and I have a memory. And I remember things. It seems like everyone around me's forgotten. For example, I remember there was once a person named Richard Nixon. He went to China, and he agreed that Taiwan is part of China. And now, suddenly, Taiwan's an independent nation we're going to go to war to defend. I remember the basics of World War II. Russia was on our side in World War II. We were allies. Come to the Canadian Parliament, they say, here we have a man who fought against us in World War II, and 100% of the Parliament stood up and applauded. They all had forgotten the basics of World War II. I give you many more examples like this. The erasure of memory, and I'm talking about memory of the Civil War, a memory of the Norman Conquest. I'm talking about memories of things that happened in our own lifetime, and people have forgotten it, so they become unanchored, and any emotional thing that hits them, they go along with it, not realizing, wait a minute, Taiwan is part of China. We already agreed to that. Wait a minute, Russia was on our side in World War II. They were our friends and allies. We shouldn't be applauding someone who's going against them. So I can give you more of these, but the erasure of memory, of living memory, I'm going to talk about memory of books, but it's amazing to me how that has happened.
Well, certainly the issue of memory to me is fundamental. In fact, my Midas Canada piece today is on that memory is, and collective memory is fundamental in resisting this kind of fascist ideology that's spreading, because they make us forget what fascism was when it really was a gangster ideology. We have to remember what happened in Weimar. We have to remember how democracy and freedoms have been taken away, and we can't think of ourselves as too smart for that. That's what Adorno writes, is that, it was the ideology of the clever who were most susceptible, because they didn't take these Nazis seriously. So I agree with you totally that memory is fundamental, but memory is important today too, because, Russia was our ally in World War II, but Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine is just a bloodthirsty attack on the rule of law. And so, no, I think we call that out. Because if we don't, we're not being truthful to the memory of people who made decisions about how they were going to live their lives as independent people.
You've forgotten the memory of what happened in 2014.
Sorry, let's go to someone else here. Yes.
Thank you for speaking today on that. And I look at it that the US didn't realize they were in a cyber war that they lost for the past 15 years. The misinformation, disinformation, it wasn't accidental. It didn't just come from within. They were targeted. They don't know which way's up. That's exactly what happened in the 1930s in Nazi Germany. They got it to the point where people didn't know which way was up. They couldn't believe the truth that stared them in the face. We're currently under that attack right now. So for all the people here that may have whiter hair or no hair and everything else, the internet can be an equalizer. You can get on some of these nasty websites until they throw you off, and you can speak the truth to them, because there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there right now. And I've been fortunate enough to get onto some of those websites, and I just bring them back to reality, tell them to get out of their rabbit hole and watch at least 4 newscasts in the past 2 days and that aren't bots and that. But I agree that we're in difficult times, but linking into the youth here in Kingston, that we've got Queens and St. Lawrence College, which combined have about 40,000 students between them. And they have clubs, and they love to have speakers in on their clubs. So we need to stretch out, and as you said, go to their clubs to be the guest speaker. And when I lived in Waterloo, I was invited to Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier, Trent, as well as Windsor universities, because I got hooked into the clubs. And I think that the groups here, if you want to have the outreach to the youth, you've got to be the one to ask, can we come? Is there a topic you'd like us to share, and that to share our elder wisdom? And there is a lot of energy in the youth, and they really are disenfranchised, but we aren't powerless. And people are in front of their, maybe disabled and arthritic in front of their computer, if they can talk into it and do battle on the internet with some of these people without going down a rabbit hole, without getting too stressed, I think that that's something that we can do, because we can speak from that knowledge of history and going back to World War II. It actually started when Japan invaded China, and then Italy invaded North Africa. It wasn't until Europe got involved with Hitler that all of a sudden it became World War II, but I believe they're right that World War III has already started. But we just haven't recognized it.
Maybe a couple more questions, and then we'll get Charlie to.
Okay, for sure. However you guys want to do it.
I should be a bit more concise, people. We don't have a lot of time with Charlie. So thank you. Thanks, Gavin.
Charlie, I want to talk a little bit about municipal politics. Kingston doesn't have formal political parties or partisanship in its council, but it's well known the affiliations of individual members. In fact, the sitting mayor ran for the Conservatives in the most recent federal election, hosted a Pierre Poilievre rally in town. And several members of council are NDP members, carry NDP cards, and profit from NDP support in elections. Yet many of those NDP members have publicly endorsed the mayor for municipal elections, have routinely voted for pro-development motions in front of council, have supported anti-nuisance bylaws, and basically have abrogated the philosophy of the NDP. So I'd like your comment on that. In light of the party giving Eve Engler a hard time, even running for the nomination, how can the NDP tolerate so many of its members sitting on municipal councils with NDP cards in their pockets and yet not representing NDP interests? Do you have any comment on the relationship between the party nationally and provincially and what's happening on with its members on municipal councils?
No, I don't vote in Kingston. You do. So if you don't like them, you vote them out. That's how things are done. The mayor in Timmins ran against me. I supported her on many things because we were going to work together. So if you don't like what someone's doing politically, you vote them out. And if you think you can do better, that's really important because that's what we need. We need people who are able to come forward and present themselves. So present your ideas and run. And that's my offer to you.
Annette?
Yeah, I too would like, thank you very much. I too would like to bring this back to the municipal level. I've lost count, at least 5 community associations boards, including the one that's sponsoring this talk. And I'm heartily behind what the purpose of this group is, CKC, which is to bring community associations, not together in some sort of shared kumbaya moment, or even a political will, but to let them know that the other exists. And the struggle with us in Kingston, what struck me about what you said was we can't fight against ourselves in the face of a bigger threat, but that's what we're doing. In municipalities, it becomes like, well, not in my backyard. We don't want the youth shelter in our district, and et cetera, et cetera. We're fighting over trying to keep green space flexible and open, not developed, as our city council would love to do. Yes, to just take anything they can to make a buck out of. So I think what the challenge is for municipalities and mostly for associations these are all volunteers who are spending their time, money, etc., keeping things going on a variety of topics, a variety of issues. Many in Kingston are environmental as well, which is very significant, is to keep alive the notion that we're not actually fighting each other and try and focus on what is important to fight for. Like what are the bigger issues that we actually can share and keep those lines of communications open. I'm getting tired, and I'm just retiring December, so there's a ways to go, I hope, in this kind of work. But it's this kind of hidden terrain, I find, in municipalities in terms of politics and political views.
Well, just on that, I think it's really important what you're saying, and I think it's really important what groups do and bring to the table, because decisions do get made, and sometimes those decisions are done for a variety of reasons. But I remember I joined the school board. I didn't want to be on the school board, but I had to because we had to get rid of a person who was pretty destructive in our little working class school. And once I was on the school board as a trustee, there was a big fight about the school bus routes, because we're a huge rural area. We have 4 school boards, 4 different busing issues. And so I went to this meeting and I was called by the board and said, well, you shouldn't go meet with them because you're encouraging them. And I was like, well, I'm a trustee. That's my job. And then, people would drive 240 kilometers on a winter night to present their frustration with the school board. And I was told, we don't ask them questions, we just listen. And I was like, well, then why do you have a trustee? Like, we do need to engage, and there are problems. So I think it's great what you're doing. I can't tell you what the solution is to your issue, but, if we're not fighting for a better city, and if we're not fighting for a better community, then all the rest of it falls apart. And there's a lot of pressures that are downloaded to municipalities. In a lot of ways, it's not fair. They have very limited scope in what they can do. But the difference with communities where people show up and have vision and those that don't is very noticeable. So, I know it's frustrating, but I think your line that, we can't be fighting amongst ourselves. Like, what are the values we can agree on? And again, you're going to end up dealing with people from across the political spectrum on various things. I actually think that's a really good thing. I get excited when I meet someone who's not in my political universe, but we can find this point to agree on, and we can get to that point, and then maybe we can go someplace with it. Then you end up building trust. So I encourage you. I know it's frustrating, and you keep waiting. What was it? I was just in Victoria by the Sea, Prince Edward Island, and I met a guy, and he said that it's the issue is STP, the same 10 people who do everything in the community, and that was a little town. I'm sure it's the same thing in Kingston. So if you're one of the STP, all power to you, because it is a thankless job, but it needs to get it. You need to do it.
I'll make one follow-up point, which is the financialization. So you're talking about very broad-based issues in terms of international financialization. That's having a huge impact at municipal levels, and it's in this climate of chaos. It becomes you have to accept it, or else nothing.
Joan, and then
Yep.
someone here too.
So I'm just following along again with the Kingston local, I've noticed that we elected really progressive city councilors, and actually it's happened in my union too. You elect like people who are progressive, and then they get in, and it just seems they get taken over by the establishment, and yet somehow you haven't managed to do that. So I guess, like, how can we try to follow up? But what inertia, any advice on trying to not get the establishment to take over, our great progressive people who sometimes just fall in line to get them?
Well, when I announced when I told my wife that I was thinking of running, she said to me, if you come home talking like a politician, I'll smother you. And I asked her if she would keep that promise. I think, when you become part of a system, you have to accept certain things with it. When I was a federal member, I had to negotiate. I had to sit down with people I didn't necessarily like. And even in the party, when you're a member of caucus, like local heroes aren't all that helpful if they're just going out and trying to be local hero and not making change. So sometimes it's a discipline of understanding how that system works. But I think at the end of the day, it's got to be rooted in people. It's got to be rooted in going back to people and saying, what do you, these are the options that City Hall's telling us that we have. What do you think? And, when people stop calling you back, and when people stop engaging because, they're tired and, they don't want to hear the blowback if they make a bad decision. Well, you can make a bad decision, and it's okay to get someone to be upset with you if you're learning from that. But I think there has to be that two-way relationship. So the people you elect have to be connecting to you, but then you also have to keep reminding them and not blame. People make decisions based on what they think is the best information. Your job is to remind them that there's other information out there, and to be there. If you back a candidate and you back them, and then they're working for you, so get them to work.
As in your book, Charlie, and thank you for being here, in Cobalt, you talked about the exploitation of mines and the bringing in of capital from the United States. In our desire to do infrastructure in Canada, it seems we're doing a desire to bring in cash from other markets, be it China or the United States. And effectively, there are no safeguards presented with regard to 50.1% Canadian ownership or whatever. It's bring in as much money as you need. I brought this up to our local MP on Thursday this week. And in the local political arena, there was an announcement this month that the council is playing with a developer by the name of Patry, who will exist along with American owners to come and build yet another convention center in the city. The meeting is tomorrow night to get that sort of sewed up. So it's all clandestine and a little bit maybe smacks of strong mayor powers and that sort of thing. What is your take on the national and the local with regard to these monies coming in to shore up the desires of a particular government or council?
Well, it depends on the project and it depends on how much. The net benefit test for Canada has been a total joke in terms of allowing foreign takeovers that haven't benefited us. I was really trying in the last parliament to get an investigation into how we basically turned over millions of hectares of Canadian forest to a family from Indonesia that are actually based out of Shanghai that did it through a whole bunch of numbered companies. And I still wasn't able to get the Liberals or Conservatives to sit down and study it. There was no net benefit to turning our operations over to these massive foreign entities. It is a real concern when an entity comes into Canada and they have that kind of capital reach around the globe, is they can just shut us down because they don't need us and we cease to be beneficial to them. They have the power. So I think wherever possible, we have to look at what's being offered and why is it being brought in. These public-private partnerships have proven again and again and again to be disastrous. I mean, the Liberal government loved them. The Conservative government loved them. But, we don't need private partnerships in building hospitals. We need public investment because this is infrastructure. But there are other projects where bringing in a foreign player could benefit. And so we have to look at that. And that's where we used to have pretty solid rules and laws. Now it's like those things have all been blown out the door. But one of the things you may see with the fact that this whole WTO globalization scam has fallen apart is that nations are now going to start to look much more at procurement locally and regionally, something we were not allowed to do under the globalization agreements. And we should be making those decisions. We should be making procurement decisions based on region wherever possible to shore up and build our economy. So I'd like to hear Mark Carney talk about that. He keeps talking about nation building projects. I think there's a number of things we need to talk about nation building. For example, food sustainability. We should be looking at housing, the fact that so many people are unable to afford to live. How do you kickstart an economy and kickstart our mills that are being shut down because of the trade wars? Well, you build houses and you train up people and you make life affordable. And you do that using Canadian products. And that's nation building. That's going to build the nation a hell of a lot more than giving another $30 billion to Suncor, who will give it to their investors. So it is a frame that we have to look at. And I think, what's the benefit to us? That's a frame we have to put on each of these things when we talk about development now. So maybe your mayor can explain what is the benefit and why.
Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, quick one.
What can we do to help you in your effort to lead the resistance?
Well, thank you so much for that. It's the strangest life I'm leading now. I look at a world that terrifies me, and I realize I got to speak up. I got to do something. And the more I do, the more confident I feel we can get through this. And I don't know where this goes in the long term, but I think that we have to be in connection with one another. This is the information we're trying to do through the Midas Canada Network. I decided to work with the Masilas brothers because I couldn't believe how much reach they had in Canada, the people that were outside of the political realm who were listening and paying attention. I thought, if I can speak to them and try and talk about resistance, well, maybe we can start to take back from the Joe Rogans and take back from the Steve Bannons. And this is something that's happening nationally. So, I'd like to get back to Kingston to do in-present resistance talks and town halls. I'm looking forward to being able to do that. We have the Resistance Charlie Angus Substack. I'm trying to write essays. I'm actually working on two right now. One is on the Terminator future of military AI and what it means, something I may not get into in other subjects, but trying to keep an analysis, trying to keep language and trying to give people a framework for seeing the world we're in. That's really what I'm doing. So how can you help? Well, if you support as a subscriber to Midas Canada, it makes a difference. We're a very small team. If you read the Substack, it makes a difference. And then if you want me to come back to Kingston, we are looking to, in the new year, we've done a heavy touring this year, and in the spring we're starting to look at places to get back to build and to encourage people so that we can start to leave behind organizations and groups and people with ideas about how to rebuild democracy from the ground up.
Yeah. Maybe get what? Yeah, you and then.
Yeah, I didn't know whether I should ask this question or not. This is one of those hypotheticals. If, now we get right down to the nitty gritty of politics here. If you were a part of this little tiny caucus that the NDP has in Ottawa right now, how would you vote tomorrow?
Well, Mama Angus didn't raise her boy to answer hypotheticals when it comes to politics, but my feeling is that we can't have an election now. Things are too uncertain. There are things I don't like in that budget, and there are things that I will use, but I think the political instability is something we don't need right now. And that's what I would tell my colleagues is we've got to get some stability. We've got to get our sea legs. I think we're not in a great parliament in a sense because it isn't a majority. It could come down at any time, but we don't have a proper opposition. This is the problem with the Conservatives is they're not acting as a proper opposition. When you're looking at pure Poilievre rage politics, he's not there saying to Carney, well, what about this and what about that? And the New Democrats, unfortunately, were so small. We're not sitting on committees where there's so many of these committees where you need another voice to say, wait a minute, what are you doing with this immigration policy? Wait a minute, what's this about Indigenous consultation, whether or not you're going to have it or not? You need a functioning, the guardrails on both sides to keep government in check. And right now we have, 1-2 seats shy of a majority. So but not a functioning opposition. It's not a great situation, but I think we have to get through this period and then the Canadian people will decide what they want to do from there. Don't quote me on that. Oh, it's being recorded. Haha.
Charlie, recently I saw a video of you in Mexico speaking about what they are doing, developing communities. I wonder if we need that kind of education as well. I think people sometimes think developing community is some complicated thing where maybe you don't have the personal wherewithal to go out and connect with people in a way that's going to bring results. But to me, that video of what they're doing in Mexico was really enlightening, and it gave me hope that there are ways to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, seeing how in Mexico they brought like 8 million people out of poverty. So yeah, it's possible. Going into these areas in the inner cities that were complete wastelands and rebuilding them with community centers and teach. When we were there, seeing people being taught astronomy by people and making their own telescopes. This is what you need to be doing. This is nation building, like building community, making it possible for people to live. The vision of livable cities is part of this vision. And I think we shouldn't just say, okay, we're under threat, so we'll get by with the bare minimum. Suncor is not expecting to get by with the bare minimum. They're asking for the full shooting match. So what also being in Mexico taught me is that, we can't be smug as Canadians. There's places that can teach us lessons about democracy. And I think that that's what we need to be open to and learning. And again, challenging ourselves that we could make a better country. We need to be a better country. We will be a better country if we stand up to the MAGA threat. But then what are we going to do it for? We're going to do it so that we build a country where people aren't left behind, where our communities are livable and our cities and our towns are places that build confidence. And I think if we don't set that as our goal, then sooner or later we're just going to be slowly eaten apart by the isolation and the fear and the rage machine. So we have a job to do, and this is why it's been so great to talk with you folks today. And I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, and I want to come back down to Kingston and maybe we can and see what you're up to. So thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. City elected a Democratic Socialist as mayor, you know, the world has some hope in it, even south of the border in the belly of Satan.
Absolutely. Yes. Great.
Thank you very much, Charlie. That was terrific. Great to see you virtually and hear your words of wisdom. Thank you very much for making time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks everybody. Feel free to drink to the bar. I gather the booze is cheap, and the conversation, of course, will be congenial. So, yeah, I hope you can hang around. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.